Cyril Ramaphosa has set up a number of inquiries and commissions in an attempt to rid government of various levels of corruption. This week, Angelo Agrizzi continued his testimony in the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into state capture. We've also got the Public Investment Corporation inquiry that started on Monday, as well as the Mokgoro Commission. In studio with me, Dr. Dale McKinley, political activist and independent researcher, says that these commissions and inquiries are just a waste of time and have merely reduced to entertainment. Joining him, we've got Deborah Mutemwa-Tumbo, the head of legal and investigations at Corruption Watch. Good to have both of you. Welcome to One in Live.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Dale, there's no way I can't begin with you. So you're not taking these seriously? You think
no,
I
think that was a little bit of a one-sided perspective.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah, what I was saying was that yes, these can be quite useful in surfacing a range of very serious issues. We've seen the Zondo Commission and what has been told there by whether it's Bosasa and all the ministers on the Gupta scandal. So these are useful in terms of airing these things. But the question I was asking was, what happens with commissions? So we have all of this sort of like revelations that come out, and then nothing happens. So if one looks back, we have 4 commissions that have come under Ramaphosa, 20 to 25 commissions that came from 1994 up until now. And I was asking yesterday when we were having a debate on the radio, can anybody tell me one commission where there really anybody has paid any responsibility, has gone to jail, has something has happened to them? So I was saying there's a disconnect between the commission that happens and what happens as a result of what comes out of the commission. And that's what I think concerns most South Africans, is that yes, it's very entertaining, it's very, oh my gosh, there's another revelation, and then it sort of nothing happens, and 3 years down the road, we're back to square one.
Yeah, and we're asking the same questions.
Correct.
And we're trying to find somebody that is actually going to take the fall for what happened, and that isn't necessarily what's going on. But we're going to dig deeper into that. Do you share the same sentiments as Dale?
I think what happens after the commission is a very important question, and I think it's a question that the whole of South Africa is asking. And, the point that Dale makes is that, in the past, not much has happened following these commissions of inquiry. There's a lot of fanfare, there's a lot of media attention, the public is engaged for a while, but it seems that at the end of it all, there's a very small measure of accountability that follows these kinds of commissions of inquiry. But in saying that, I think the problem isn't with commissions of inquiry, the problem is with the aftermath, as the question entails, what happens afterwards. And I think it's important to point out that in the current Zondo Commission, one of the terms of reference, particularly around the capture of the criminal justice system, looks particularly at that. So has the criminal justice system been captured, and has it not been working effectively in order to bring people implicated in crimes to book?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people actually calling what's happening in South Africa with regard to these commissions and different political hearings and parliamentary hearings. It's that these are kangaroo courts. Like, you ask a question, where is our justice system in all of this? I mean, is there not enough evidence to bring these before a court of law? Why do we need to waste all this money on commissions and not rather take it to court? Perhaps you can answer that question. Maybe both of you. Dale, begin.
Well, I think part of that is because the NPA, the Hawks, have been debilitated. Essentially, let's take the Bosasa scandal right now that we're hearing in front of Agrizzi's testimony. It has come to light that the Hawks have had a docket since 2010 on the first Bosasa scandal. They've been sitting on it for 9 years. And of course, we have to ask the question, why have they been sitting on it? Well, we know, because they became politicized, political decisions were taken not to prosecute certain individuals. So yes, there is a direct connection between what a commission can do and what your prosecuting authorities, your crime intelligence, your intelligence services, and everything else can follow up and make sure that somebody pays. So if we don't have a system over on this side that's working, the commissions will make all sorts of... Let's take the Farlam Commission. Have we already forgotten? The Farlam Commission on Marikana made a huge range of recommendations. Has anybody paid a single response? Has anybody taken any responsibility? No. The commissioner lost her job. The police commissioner, that was pretty much it. So there's a huge disconnect here. And I think that's what frustrates us, is that, yes, while we want these things to be aired, we also want to see people pay for what they've done. And that's, I think that's where the frustration comes in.
It certainly is frustrating. It really is. I mean, you look at something like, you mentioned Marikana, let's talk life esidimeni. I mean, there are lives that have been lost, and many lives. Yes, there has been compensation that have been paid to some of the families, but again, who is held accountable? And that's, again, a big issue.
Yes, and I think I will keep taking it back to the efficacy of the criminal justice system, and to the extent that it has been captured, what needs to be done in order to bring it to a level where the basic South African person or the person on the street can see justice being meted out against these perpetrators and these people. And the question you asked was whether there's enough evidence that comes to light during these commissions. I don't think that the evidence is out there in the public domain prior to these commissions. And, the commissions of inquiry are primarily established or constituted to investigate, because much of the time we don't know what we don't know. And a lot of evidence comes to light, and these commissions of inquiry have broad powers to investigate. They can summon witnesses, they can, it's inquisitorial in nature, and the chairperson, who is usually a judge, doesn't necessarily have to be a judge, can really extrapolate more information than you'd find in the public domain just out there. That's not to say there isn't enough evidence in some instances, particularly perhaps with Bosasa, as Dale mentions, but the commissions of inquiry are really there to root out the truth of the whole matter.
Yeah, so we root out the truth, we get this information,
Yeah.
we are shocked, our jaws drop, we get testimonies like what we're seeing from Angelo Agrizzi of yesterday. I think he was saying that things were so bad that even the Pope would have been made corrupt at the goings-on. Now, the reality is we have all this information, but what's actually going to happen? I mean, Dale?
Well, you see, this is where I was raising the problem of the legislative framework that frames our commissions. It's a 1947 piece of legislation called the Commissions Act. That's still, and this was designed with executive power in mind. So my argument that we have, as also the organization I work with, Right to Know, is that we need to broaden those powers to Parliament. In other words, so a commissioner and a commission can recommend to the president. The president can sit on it.
Yeah.
As
The
Thabo
president's got all
did
power.
with the Zimbabwe Kampempe Commission for 10 years. They sat on it. They sat on the Farlam Commission. He doesn't have to say, when Tom Moyane was suggested that he be fired, well, he fired him because he had the power to do so. But nothing else has happened in SARS. So I think what we have is we have a situation where we need legislative changes to give much more transparency and openness and parliamentary power to the commissions, take it away from the executive, and then when the recommendations come, say that these must then be followed and prosecuted if there's ample evidence by the NPA, by the Hawks. And so we have some kind of end game here. Otherwise, it's a merry-go-round. And we've seen for 25 years, all these commissions, hundreds of millions of rands being spent, our expectations rising, and then we get disappointed.
Well, that's what I was going to talk about, is the money that is spent on commissions. I mean, it's hundreds of millions that we see going into these commissions, and then a lot of the time nothing comes out of it. I mean, let's go back to as early as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I mean, last year we spoke quite at length because of the anniversary of the TRC hearings, and it feels like some of the recommendations there as well let the country down, and many saying that had those recommendations of the Commission actually been implemented, South Africa would be in a much better position than we are right now.
Yes.
And a lot of that hatred and the animosity and the underlying problems that we have as a country would not be there.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have any views on that?
Well, I think it goes back to the fact that commissions are there to investigate and make recommendations, and you rightly point out that if the recommendations were taken seriously, South Africa would be in a much better position, and I think that can be said for a number of commissions of inquiry that have taken place since 1994. So the problem doesn't necessarily lie with the commissions of inquiry. I think the problem lies with the executive power and how they work with those recommendations, and also with the justice system. Dale speaks about, the legislative framework possibly being re-looked at, and I completely agree with that. One of the interesting things is that, the commissions of inquiry are meant to be called to investigate matters of public concern. So the public is concerned. The public is meant to be engaged. They're meant to be held in an open and transparent manner. But when the report and the recommendations come out, there's no obligation on the president to release it to the public, and there's no obligation on the president or anybody who calls a commission of inquiry to act on the recommendations. And I think that's something that seriously needs to be looked at, because I mean, there's definitely space and, you know, room for these to just be used as political playing cards rather than, you know, tools that can bring about ultimate justice.
It's almost like, as you say, it's really at the president's whim to decide what he does with that information and if these findings are done. Some use it to their advantage, and the others are sort of brushed to the side and say, okay, no, we'll sort this out. But like you say, it can disappear for 10 years. It's a political tool, isn't it?
Yeah, and here's the problem, Leanne, is that this has become politicized. What we, you know, appointees in government, we criticize the government by saying you've put people in positions that can't do that job because they're political appointees and they're not there for expertise. Well, what we had was a politicization of the commission's process. So they're used as political tools. Let's take the arms deal in the Sariti Commission. The arms deal was a complete whitewash of what everybody knew were problems and serious corruption that took place. But the commission said everything's fine. Therefore, ex-President Zuma said, what are you complaining about? We've had a commission of inquiry. So it's used as, it basically, instead of going to a court of law, it's used to basically allow people to get off and scot-free. So I think we need to depoliticize the process, give it back to Parliament, take the powers away from the presidency, make it independent inquiries with maybe even increased powers and with prosecutorial outcomes that basically make it sure that those people who have a case to answer will answer that case. And that's when I think people will start trusting a commission's process instead of seeing it possibly as a very entertaining thing to watch on television and saying, yeah, but where's this going to go?
Yeah. Do we, the public, hold too much emphasis on commissions? Do we perhaps think that, wow, all of this is there and, you know, this has been unveiled and things are going to change? So do we, the public, hold too much?
I think to a large extent they've been presented to us as the solution to the problem. And commissions of inquiry are not enough. They are not the solution to the problem. And this is simply because they're not a substitute for the justice system. They're not a substitute for the criminal justice system. And over and above that, I think as civil society and as citizens, I think we could be more active in ensuring that when, you know, revelations do come to light, that action is taken, even from a civil perspective. And maybe an example that I can give is, you know, some of the findings that have been released in the Nugent Commission. One of them being that certain contracts that SARS entered into had no benefit whatsoever to the revenue collector. But over and above that, you know, there's implications of possible corruption. And, you know, in instances such as that, usually when a government contract is given out, you know, it goes through a tender process. And so perhaps maybe there were 5 finalists in the tender process and 1 was awarded through corrupt means. There are 5 other, you know, individuals, either juristic persons or, you know, people that could come back to SARS and say, you know, now we know that there was corruption involved in the awarding of this tender and would like to have it reviewed by a court of law through administrative law and set aside.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room for the public to get involved.
Yeah. I look at different, and the public, I think, are losing a lot of faith in these commissions. I mean, we look back, I was reading an article all the way back, I think it was in 2017, talking about the commissions that were running in 2014. In 2014, I think there were 5 commissions running at the same time. Estimated cost of those 5 commissions, 300 million rand. Put RDP houses onto that. I mean, you're looking at, you know, almost 5,000 RDP houses that could have been built. Not 5,000, more than that, whatever it may be. But the reality is that this money that's being spent on these commissions that actually invariably amount to nothing could be spent elsewhere.
Absolutely, and I think that if the public felt that there was some kind of outcome from these commissions, then they would say, okay, it's okay to pay senior counsel 50,000 rand a day, and you have 3 senior counsels sitting there for 60 days, as in the Farlam Commission or wherever. But in the context of the expenditure versus the outcome, I think that what we have is we have a problem of how we deal with when corruption comes, when the investigative journalists. Remember that many of these commissions were as a result of investigative journalism coming up, the Scorpio and the leaks, the Gupta leaks, and all sorts of other things. And when these come, why is it? The question that we have is why are not the law enforcement agencies taking these cases up? Instead, we have politicians say, let's have a commission. let's air everything out. Let's have it all out. Everybody goes, wow, and then we park it. And people continue as if nothing ever happened. So I think what we have to have is we have to have a completely different kind of relationship between commissions and the justice system, as we say, so that when the evidence is there, let there be prosecutions. If we want a commission to deal with some of the political and social and economic issues and have a debate, fine, but let the justice system do its job and let those who are in those positions do their job. One cannot replace the other. And I think most South Africans are feeling as though commissions have come to replace the justice system.
Yeah, which is a big problem because A, they are toothless, B, it is up to the President's discretion, as you have said, whether or not to implement the findings, and in fact, whether or not to make the findings public, because he could very much so say, you know what, I got the findings, I'm not even going to make them public. So, you know, at the end of the day, should we stop these commissions and rather let our justice system work, or is that the biggest problem of all? The justice system is not working. Let's end this up.
Yes, I think the justice system isn't working and it certainly has to work. So hopefully what comes out of the state capture inquiry will be, you know, some of the issues that have, you know, just destabilized and, you know, hurt the justice system in such a way that it can't work for the South African people. And we're hoping that, you know, at the end of this all, we'll have a stronger and better justice system.
Dale, finally, do you think this could be the turning point?
Let's make them both work. Let's have commissions that actually allow us to have a national debate, that give us that information, and let's make our justice system work so that the two can be complementary. Right now, they're not. They're contradictory.
Great chatting to you both. Thank you very, very much for being with us here on the program. Of course, Dale McKinley is political activist, independent researcher, and Deborah Mutemwa-Tumbo, the head of legal and investigations at Corruption Watch. We take a break. We've got your news at 7 after this.